It does, because I got the other.
Oh,
Right there. We're gonna start reserving that for you, Frank. I think it's gonna say planning board. It says a for Frank.
I fell into the election and.
Fellas, we are now live. Welcome to the Huntersville Ordinances Advisory Board meeting. The chair calls this meeting to order. Attendance, perhaps Jake and Michael are caught in traffic. We know that Joe is going to be absent today. Okay. Do we have a motion for the minutes?
I'd like to make a motion to approve with an amendment, just adding my comments on the campaign sign ordinance. I think there's some additional clarity that needs to be added into that section that was not in the minutes.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second? Yes, sir.
I'll make that second.
Okay.
With the provision, did you actually provide the new language you wanted added?
Just based off of the video recording, if we could just put it in there verbatim, that would be like we have in the past.
Okay. And as long as he's satisfied, then I'll make a second.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the minutes? Is it unanimous? It looks like we have public comments today. So we have two. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. The chair reserves the right to shorten the time limit for speakers if an unusually large number of persons have signed up to speak. Speakers may not be given all or a portion of their time to other speakers. Very first speaker we have is Gatewood Campbell. If you will tell us your name and that you live in our town. You do not have to give a street address. Thank you.
My name is Gatewood Campbell. I'm a resident of Huntersville. I don't get this paper delivered to my house, but I picked it up out there, and the first thing I want to say is, y'all don't read this article. It is a completely biased article that I find full of fictitious news. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. To you, our Huntersville Ordinances Advisory Board, I want to express my sincere appreciation. You are dedicated volunteers. You applied for this advisory board because you care. You were appointed by the elected in our town because you showed experience and the desire to willingly give us your time and attention. You do not take this lightly. You have proven that in the past, and have shown you are the right people to sit here today. The level of commitment that you display is extensive. You show up here having researched each topic, and you're prepared to discuss and take action. Thank you for that. I remain perplexed by the actions of the board and the town attorney on Monday night. I've watched several times and still have no reasonable explanation. I'm not sure where you are, and we, the citizens, go from here. I hope the coming weeks will allow time to sort out and repair Monday night's vote. Until then, keep on keeping on. You are qualified, intentional, and wise volunteers. Don't lose sight of that. Thank you for who you are and what you do for the town of Huntersville.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Dan Boone, 317 Southland Road. I'm here this afternoon to talk about the Land Development Ordinance Advisory Board. That's the original name for the HOAB. And I want to first say, if somebody thinks that I have done something illegal when I was on this board or any board, please come and direct those questions directly at me, because that's a direct attack on my character. But I wanted to give a little history about where you folks started. And this board was put together for citizens to come and address their concerns with what they felt was wrong with ordinances in this town. And in November of 2015, before the candidates were elected, we met and we decided to put together a board where the citizens could come and talk about the ordinances, how they affected their businesses. And we were charged to put this together within the first 100 days of Mayor Annarella's being mayor. Mark Gibbons and I went down to Cornelius. We met with Wayne, and we put together the bylaws. I wrote the bylaws. At the time, we did not have two town attorneys. We had one part-time town attorney. And the board is made up of citizens from you had to be a citizen of Huntersville or had to have a business in Huntersville. And that group their big pushback is, well, I got businesses to run. And we asked them that if you would be part of this board, we would keep the meetings to 90 minutes. We would start at 3:30, and we promised to have you on your way home by 5. And that seemed to be a pretty good compromise. And in February 1st, 2016, we had a meet and greet of all the applicants that wanted to be on the advisory board for not only your board, but Park and Rec. And the place was full. And the candidates had a chance to visit with the commissioners and vice versa. And some of the people who put their name in the hat to be on the original advisory board, there were 24 people who wanted to have these seats. Just to name a few: Bruce Anderson, Robert Bowman, Jonathan Bradshaw, Mark Goodbye, Jesse Jones, an attorney in town, Jeffrey Bleglise, Daniel Reichert, an attorney in town, Stephen Schreider, Jeff Snide, Jess Steele, Tim Taylor, Nick Walsh, one of the original people, Brian Hines, Matt Jones, you were one of the original people that signed up, Jay Henson, and Joanne Miller. And we had our first meeting on March 3rd, 2016, and we looked at the ordinances. People came in, and one of the biggest ordinances we had that really needs to be looked at is what I'll call the Beehives ordinance. And if you have a chance to go back and look at the records or the minutes, it's good reading. But anyway, I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I actually attended the Ordinance Advisory Board meeting and didn't know anybody on it or about it. I just had been invited by a neighbor. I talk about that experience all the time, and I will talk about it some more this week, but I'll spare you from it here. For those of you who weren't there Monday, I just want to clarify, since we've had some speakers today, the board voted on Monday night to change our bylaws significantly, I will say, and I haven't seen them since they've been changed, so I'm not going to speak to that. But if our town attorney would like to, since she is the one that wrote the bylaws this time, she may, and if she wants to withhold and get that when she gets it to us, then she wants to tell us, that's fine. We'll just hold that off. So I'll give her that opportunity if she wants to speak to it. What the people did not hear that may not know what they can and cannot do now. So, Ms. Floop, would you like that opportunity?
You all will receive a copy as soon as they are signed and updated by the mayor. I do not have a signed copy as of right now, but you all will receive a copy.
Okay. Also, the agenda was amended and sent to me. I did not, I just took the agenda. I'm not trying to cause any issues. This is definitely uncharted water for me. So take that as you will. The agenda was sent out, it was amended, and very quickly amended, actually, and here we are. But we have two issues to discuss today. I'm sorry if you came thinking that you were going to elect a new chair. I believe that's been moved to July. Sorry. And we can get started on 4A. I appreciate Matt sending us a copy of the state statute that applies to conditional districts. So we're going to go ahead and discuss 4A, TA 2403, conditional district. Proposed amendment to clarify the intent of the zoning districts and modify ordinance allowance considerations in the conditional district CD rezoning process. Mr. Priest.
Good afternoon. For those who don't know me, I'm Brad Priest, the newbie in the department, the planning department. So I've been asked to present this to you guys, and so thank you for hearing my presentation. So yes, TA 2403 is an application to modify how we look at city rezonings, and just kind of looking at the purpose and the background on where this came from. It really comes from the 2040 plan. And so what you're seeing here is several recommendations in that 2040 plan that talk about providing flexibility to our ordinance, trying to find a way to get excellent development, trying to have a trade-off of having excellent development, but when there's a need to have flexibility in the ordinance standards to get that excellent development, to try to do that, right? And so we see it in land use policy LU8. It says emphasize form and flexibility. 8.2, evaluate and strengthen incentives to encourage the achievement of higher design standards. And then below it, it says offer flexibility using performance standards. So looking at this, staff was looking at what do we have that's a natural ability to provide flexibility in our ordinance. And what we have currently is the CD rezoning process. Right? So when someone goes through a conditional district rezoning process, in chapter 11.4.7 of the ordinance, there in section K, it says that the town board may modify standards of the zoning and subdivision ordinance. So there's an automatic process that we currently have in our code to provide flexibility. But here's the issue that has proven to be a little bit of a handcuff in regarding to getting excellent design and getting things that we want through that conditional rezoning process. At the very end, there you say, it says they can modify the ordinance, the town board can, provided the spirit of the regulations are maintained. So essentially what that means from a staff perspective is you can vary something, but you can't just go against what the ordinance is trying to do, right? So that kind of puts a handcuff on what we can do with unique design. So I put a few examples that I just kind of pulled out. They're just complete. There's no project that are proposing these designs. This is just an example. For instance, if we had an application that was on the lake and they wanted to come in and, we have a principle in our ordinance that you don't park in the front. The building is in the front and all the parking is in the back, right? That is a standard fundamental principle in our ordinance. So if someone came in and said, hey, I want to dedicate a park along the lake, a public park access, but in order to do that, I'm going to have to put the parking in the front away from the lake. I want to get a rezoning for that. The town board couldn't approve that because it wouldn't be in the spirit of it. Well, the planning staff wouldn't recommend that because it wouldn't be in the spirit of the ordinance. And just another example, if somebody wanted to do, was going to do transportation improvements, build a thoroughfare, build a portion of the thoroughfare, make a significant connection, but in order to make the financials work, they need a few more stories, higher, a little bit more density than the code allows. Again, that handcuff would be there, and we wouldn't be able to prove that even though there'd be a lot of public good. So what staff is proposing is two parts. First, go in and remove the section within the spirit of the ordinance to allow that flexibility that the 2040 plan is asking for. But part two, go into chapter 3 of the ordinance where it talks about what the intent of the conditional rezoning process is, and give an expectation of what we'd like to achieve through the conditional rezoning process. Why are we giving modifications? Why do we need that flexibility? We'd like to see excellent design over the minimums of the ordinance. It's not just a variance process per se, but it's actually doing something over and above that we're getting. And then number two, as an example, projects that deliver public good, as was mentioned. Maybe they're doing a significant transportation project. They're doing a streetscape. They're building a greenway. Ordinance says that you only have to dedicate the right-of-way. They're building the whole thing and make a substantial connection. So there's public good in that. So if we can get that, that's something that we really want to look at trying to do. So that would be the proposal. The text, as mentioned, is just shown here for 11.4.7. And then changes to chapter 3.1.2. Again, these are sections that highlight what the intent and the purpose is. One thing to point out, though, it is up to the town board at their discretion to understand when these things are met, right? And these are just examples of the types of things that we want. It's not locking the town board into a certain set of requirements. It's giving examples, something that we can give developers in the community to say, yes, you have the ability to go through and get modifications through this process. However, this is the intent. This is what we would like to see as we go through that rezoning process. And going through and looking at other areas of the region, other towns and municipalities, is it common for conditional rezonings to allow modifications of the ordinance through that process? Yes, it is. They do it in different ways. Sometimes it's very generalized, like our ordinance currently does. Cornelius and Davidson are very generalized. It's just built into the process. You go through and you get a conditional rezoning, you can modify the ordinance. It's very broad. Charlotte's new UDO and down in Matthews are very specific. They outline very specifically what type of things they want to see. They have to have review criteria, environmental design, atypical design, sustainability, public amenities, city improvements, those type of things. So it's a mix there. But what this is doing, what we're proposing from staff perspective is kind of like a hybrid. It's very broad, but at the same time, we're giving an idea to developers and to the general public what we're trying to achieve with this process. So that'll conclude my presentation. We are looking for a recommendation from the HOAB. We'd like to move forward with this to next month's public hearing, so we greatly appreciate your thoughts on this.
Staff? Okay, Kathy?
Do you have any like specific examples where this change would have altered the outcome of past projects that have come before, whether they were unable to be approved because this was not in there?
So again, kind of going back to what I mentioned before, this change doesn't lock in the town board. So when you go through a CD rezoning, it's a completely legislative decision. So the town board can approve and deny any kind of negotiation that they want. But what this at least tries to do is give an idea. It's not locking the town board into one thing or not. But I don't know if that answers your question or not, but before and after this, the town board can still make those decisions on what CD rezonings they want to approve.
It might be good to add some language into this because, under 160D 703B, there are, it's not, this allows for flexibility, which I'm all for. But there are limitations, and those limitations can create liability for the town. If we ask for traffic improvements that are not roughly proportional, rationally related, we can create a taking. So I think some language in here that, yes, this is good for flexibility, but all this flexibility is still subject to the limitations prescribed under 160D 703B.
Okay, I hear you. So,
And, I mean, I can read
Yes.
them off to you so you understand it. So those limitations would be taxes, impact fees, building design elements within the scope of 160D 702B, driveway-related improvements in excess of those allowed in 136-18, Part 29, 160A-307, or other unauthorized limitations on the development or use of land.
so a lot of those, that's a good point. Let me just clarify again something very specific that was intentional when staff was drafting this. So back in 11.4.7, this language in that section of the ordinance deals with the requirements and the actual process of approving conditional rezonings. And that's when it talks about all the conditions that are proposed have to be voluntary. You know, so you can't violate 160D. You can't make somebody do something arbitrary and over the top. So that's in the process. What we're adding to is chapter 3, which is the intent, the high level vision, the goals, I don't want to say pie in the sky because we really want it, but it's something that's you know, a goal and a vision statement per se. It's not locking in the process of how rezonings are actually reviewed. That's what's actually causing the lack of flexibility, because we have that statement in the actual process section. So we want to remove that, but at the same time, go into the intent and be clear what we want in that process.
Matt, when you were reading it, did you have a specific thing in your mind that was not going to naturally fit with this, or?
No, I think it just needs to be clear to applicants and staff that there are clear limitations of conditional districts, and if those are not followed, it can create issues for us long-term.
Okay. Harrison?
I guess my question is just from a practical point of view, does this streamline the process somehow? I mean, it still has to go to the town board, right?
Yes, sir.
So what are we gaining from this versus the way it is now? I mean, I don't understand.
So what we're gaining is more flexibility. So when the 2040 plan asked to think about changing the ordinance standards for projects that are unique and maybe create public good. So I use the example, if somebody wanted to do a project that's on the lake, they want to dedicate a park on the lake, but to do that, they had to move their parking lot into near the street. Our ordinance is just that there's nothing in our ordinance that would allow something like that. So removing that sentence from here would allow that flexibility to get a project like that. You couldn't do it here from a staff perspective. We couldn't recommend it because that's going against the spirit of the ordinance.
Okay, I understand that, but my point is, even with that, if they wanted to do that, it would still have to go to the town board for approval.
That's correct.
So I still don't see what we're gaining. It still got to go through the process.
You go through the process, but when the town board looks at that ordinance and says, well, you know, that's a limiting factor. There's only so much that they should go because it's written into the process that there's a limiting factor. So this
They can't approve it, period, because it.
Well, it's a legislative action, it's their interpretation.
Yeah.
So to your point, but this makes it nice and clear that it's completely a legislative action.
Okay. Okay. I don't believe that Huntersville has a lot of lake frontage, so is there another example? I know you mentioned transportation and that, but can you give us another concrete example that I'm just struggling to see it a little bit?
Well, I mean, those were the two that just came up to my mind. You know, we have a form-based code that really emphasizes that type of thing, that the automotive type of use is the less part of the development. I mean, yes, the less part of the development, the parking, you know, the building. So, you know, think of anything where you're going, I'll go for the height example, right? If you're at 2 stories and you want to go to 5 stories, you know, that's not just if the rule is 2 stories, if you're doubling it, is that within the spirit, right? So that becomes a question mark, and that limiting factor would be removed.
Right. I think that my question too is, because what Harrison's saying is the board can already do that. I was questioning what the difference actually is, because in the last several years, I've seen these modifications go through with staff recommendation, even though they go greatly against the ordinances. So why then is it okay? Or why now do we need to put this in writing when these kinds of things have been happening already?
So from a staff perspective, there's 11.4.7, right?
Right.
And I do understand that, it's completely up to the town board anyway. But I believe there is high value in putting in writing in the ordinance what the 2040 plan is trying to get us to do. That when we meet with developers, first off, they say, well, this really doesn't work for us. What are we going to do here? Well, our answer is you can go through a conditional rezoning process, but there's nothing to talk about what we're looking for in the ordinance. If we go to them and say, yes, you can get modification, but at the same time, our 2040 plan and potentially now the ordinance says, you got to bring something to the table. You've got to be able to go over and above the bare minimums. That is a powerful tool as well, in my opinion.
Okay. So with Matthews and Mint Hill, they actually spelled out what those specific kinds of things are like. Why did we choose not to give specifics?
Because for the reason going back of trying not to lock in the town board in what exactly needs to be done. The spirit and intent is given of what we're looking for, but that's why if you look at the specific language, it's including but not limited to. Here are some reasons for it. We didn't want to lock it in because then we'd put ourselves in the same situation. If we get a project that doesn't fit that mold, that doesn't fit the 1, 2, 3, 4, then with the town board's in the same situation, well, the ordinance kind of doesn't touch on that, so we might not be able to do it. So the ability to have that unique design, something that we might not be thinking of right now, we want to be able to consider that.
Anyone else have a question? Thank you. Scott.
I think these are good questions, and I think the more you ask, the better it was framed. And I think what Matt's trying to do is just put some buffers on there so that we don't put the town board in a bad position
Okay.
of actually approving something that sounded very right, but actually breached other rules elsewhere. So with that safety built into it, I think the purpose of what you're trying to accomplish, you and the staff are trying to accomplish, is enlightened. I think you're trying to create elasticity for the good of the community, and still keeping a tight rein on what developers are allowed to do. You're shaping where the variances can be.
Yeah, I understand.
Is that a fairly generalized message of what's been discussed to this point? That what you're trying to accomplish is not a bad thing. It sounds purposeful and it sounds constructive. But I think Matt's always been the conscious of the HOA board with regard to let's don't get over our skis and get jubilated, get into a state of jubilation and then realize we overstepped where we should be standing.
Sure.
It is litigious world we live in.
A couple of questions that just came up. You talk about the public good as determined by a planner, the engineer?
The town board. The town board would decide that. And that's why, again, in the bottom, it's including but not limited to. Examples may include but are not limited to. So when there's that type of thing is what we're looking for, and it's just, again, it communicates intent.
Okay. The second thing is, so this would prevent someone from having to go through a rezoning, just the whole process of rezoning, and if, you could, is that right? I mean,
No, sir. They would still have to go through the rezoning process.
is there anything in this change that would, I don't know if eliminate's the right word, but would allow someone to do something that, we'll take the taller building for an example, because that's a hot topic. Is there anything here that would allow them to do that without, or with a reduced requirement for advertising that change?
No, sir. It's the exact same rezoning process.
Scott?
Brad, trying to paraphrase, I think what this does, this in a way kind of lowers the guardrails on the town board to give them more freedom to go beyond. But at the same time, our 2040 plan is kind of supposed to give that direction and put up the guardrails, right? I ask this not because it's the current town board, but is there a future board? Have they been lowered to the point where if you have a pet project that comes in before the board that maybe, you know, the majority of the board just loves, and they pass something that really isn't in the 2040 vision, isn't anything else, is it give them cover to do that? I'm not saying anybody's going to do it. I'm just saying I still like some guardrails with whichever board it is, whether it's current board or the future board.
Well, I mean, I think they'd be able to do, it's not, I wouldn't say lowering the guardrails. It's, our phrase in the 2040 plan's phrase is to increase flexibility and look for alternatives. So that, I mean, that's what I'm sticking with, because again, there's many unique designs that is not envisioned by the ordinance. And that's the fundamental issue, is sometimes there's gonna be projects that this ordinance doesn't address. And to be fair, the ordinance was written in 1996, right? So here we are 30 years later, and projects are sometimes done differently. And so when we have a statement in the 11.4.7 that says within the spirit of the ordinance, that's pretty limiting. So the guardrail is the town board, and they're there, and that's their job, to look at all what's in the 2040 plan, and it's staff's job to recommend what's in the 24, what's in the ordinance, and then they make that decision. So what we want to do is just make sure that ordinance doesn't have limitations to not get something that the town and the town board really wants to get out of a project.
And I'm in support of the flexibility. Again, I'm in support of greater projects. We have fewer and fewer sites to develop. We need good quality projects. I just want to make sure that we still have something in place that you don't get a rogue 4 or 5 people that just love some crazy project that all of a sudden now they can operate and not have any kind of legislative issues with it. That's all.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion? Not many of us. Come on now.
I'd like to make a motion to approve TA 24-03, conditional district. Proposed amendment to clarify the intent of the zoning districts and modify ordinance allowance considerations in the conditional district rezoning process.
Do we have a second? Okay, we have a second. Do we have any discussion? Kathy, you get the first bite of that apple.
You referenced the 2040 plan, so when the next plan comes along, the ordinance will remain the same unless there is a difference that new plan calls for, and then it would be modified to gel with that one?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand the question. So if another plan comes in after this text amendment is approved?
After the 2040 plan.
Like when we create the
next-
2060 plan.
The next plan,
Oh,
60 plan.
okay. I gotcha. So after the 2050 plan comes?
yeah, because we do it every 10 years.
Okay. Would this change?
We're already halfway through, yeah. Would the ordinance automatically change, or would it need to be amended, just like it's being amended now from the 2030 plan?
Yes, ma'am. The ordinance would stay, no matter if the 2040 plan
Right.
is changed. This ordinance would stay in the same language that you see would be in the ordinance
Unless
until
there
this
was-
process is repeated.
Unless there was something new in the 2050 plan that would make this need to be.
Right, and we might need to come tweak it, and that's kind of the process. We get the plans, we get what we want, and then we get our ordinance to match that so we can put that into law.
I have a question. Am I even allowed to vote as a planning board member, or am I just ex officio? I am, okay. I seconded it. Again, I think anything that gives us, the staff and town board, more flexibility to drive better projects, I'm in support of.
Yes, sir.
Just real quick, engineering, you got any thoughts about this one way or the other? Is it gonna create a burden on you, or no? Right.
I'm going to say that I'm for flexibility. I'm not sure that I see quite yet where we're going with this, because with the legislative vote of any kind, the town board has sole discretion to vote yes or no, and they can make it fit any way they deem it to fit. They can make 7 modifications on a project if they want to. So that's why I was trying to get another example that I could understand. I know that we're trying to get rid of the phrase, "the spirit of the ordinance," because that seems subjective. But again, so does legislative process in general to me. So if anybody has anything that can sway me one way or the other on that, I'd appreciate it, but that's just where my head is. Yes, sir.
I'll give you another one then.
Okay.
I'll give you, for instance, downtown parking.
Yes.
So the spirit of our ordinance is we don't have any ability to just waive parking requirements, right? So if you have a downtown building and all their property is taken up by a parking lot, and they say, well, I don't want all this parking, I don't need it, I'm gonna, be down the street, I'm gonna have most of my people walking, and there's just some special circumstance, we wouldn't be able to approve that project because we require a parking lot currently in our zoning ordinance. So if they did a conditional rezoning, that would be able to be completely removed based on the specific conditions, what they're trying to do in the unique, excellent design. And so that's another example, parking in the downtown. I think we've kind of discussed that in the past as well as being kind of a, what do we do there? And so that flexibility would also help in that situation.
Are there any town center zoning areas in downtown that are not conditional?
Currently in downtown, yes, I don't think most of the downtown is not conditional currently.
For rezoning, it would be, would it then be conditional? Or I can't recall whether if you ask for a rezoning in town center that it needs to be conditional, or can you by right town center?
Oh, yes, definitely. You can
Okay.
develop in TC downtown without being conditional at this time.
Okay. I had one more thought. We have passed downtown conditional areas with smaller parking, but that is a better example for me, so thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Anything else? Yes, sir. Okay. We're ready to-
I have a question.
Okay, sorry. We have questions.
You mentioned the downtown parking, and I thought that staff was looking into modifying that ordinance specifically for downtown to maybe put money into some kind of a fund or something if you weren't able to have enough space on your parcel to have required parking. Is that going to go away now with this?
No, we're still looking at again, that was just an example of how the ordinance currently sits, right? We're looking for methodologies that we can address the downtown parking situation. So we're still working on that internally. That was just an example of how the ordinance currently sits. But yes, that's still coming.
Is there any legal implication for the favoritism that might come up from this? Like we're going to give this business some kind of consideration, but not this business? Is that going to open us up to any kind of issues there legally with a conditional districting, with, this applicant versus that applicant was what I was thinking.
We have worked with legal staff to come up with the language that's before you, so it wasn't just the planning department, it was also legal in regard to make sure that we don't infringe on that legislative aspect of it. So this is all for one and one for all, and it's very including but not limited to, so it's not locking anything down, but we're just trying to communicate firmly as possible without tying hands what we'd like to get out of our development in Huntersville.
Okay. One more thought on that. It seems to me that it still gives favoritism to a project that a lot of people like versus one that they may not care for. Maybe they don't care for the developer, maybe a lot of things. And that my understanding of what we're here to do is ask questions that come up to us that may seem simple to you or understandable to you, but, we're trying to think of things that maybe you haven't thought of. So I appreciate you hanging in there with me.
We have a second.
We have a second. All right, we're ready to vote? Okay. All in favor of, let me get it back out here. TA 2403 Conditional District. All in favor of passing this motion to approve? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 and opposed 1. So 5 to 1, and it passes. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to 4B. TA 2404, proposed amendment to remove reference to the Ordinance Advisory Board from Zoning Ordinance Article 11.4.3, parentheses A, and Subdivision Ordinance Article 5. Mr. Richards.
Good afternoon. This is a reflection of the outcome from Monday's evening, pretty straightforward. Given the new bylaws that were adopted by the board, we now need to go ahead and update the zoning and subdivision ordinance. Do that by removing references to the Huntersville Ordinance Advisory Board in Article 11.4.3A of the zoning ordinance, as well as 500 of the subdivision ordinance. I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
Sure. Yes, I'm asking for action. Sure.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion? Yes, sir. Harrison? Just a thought. Any motion at all?
Like I said, we would ask you to make a motion. If you all vote, you can vote your conscience, you can vote not to adopt this or endorse this, that's your right. But we do need some action, so we can go ahead and move forward.
Matt?
It just needs to be duly noted in the meeting minutes that the amended bylaws have not been signed by the mayor. And so from past experience, that means our current bylaws are still in place and that this was added to the agenda without the consent of the board chair. Just needs to be noted in the minutes.
Oh, boy.
Just so you know, the bylaws have been signed by the mayor, and there will be an email sent out shortly. Oh, there you go.
Now what?
So,
Yes, sir.
just a point of order, if we don't get a motion either way, I mean, it just goes without, or it just goes forward.
Harrison?
We will note that in the
Not a
record as
problem.
we,
It
yeah,
just
we'll
goes
note that in the
forward.
record at the.
We're not holding anything up for 4 months, are we? Okay.
We'll make that, yeah, we'll note it. We'll note that and move forward.
Yeah.
Excuse me. No, they just need the vote to put it on the record. They'll move on, as they told us. Okay, I need a motion so we can move forward. I have no idea if I can make a motion. I don't know.
I don't know, but I think you can, I'm assuming just no motion, you move on to the next agenda item, but I am not one that knows Robert's rules very well.
Okay. You can make a motion. Kathy?
I'd like to make a motion to approve TA 24-04, proposed amendment to remove reference to Ordinances Advisory Board from Zoning Ordinance Article 11.4.3A and Subdivision Ordinance Article 5.
May I have a second? Thank you. I have a second. All in favor? Any opposed? We have one in favor?
Discussion?
Discussion, I'm sorry. Okay, yes, sir. Let's jump in the gun.
No discussion.
Okay.
I would just like to ask, I hadn't followed this. I have no idea what's going on.
Yes, sir.
And you know, but if I look at, and I know you asked us not to read the article, but it's sitting right in front of me. It says, board takes power from the HOAB. I didn't know we really had any power, but that's okay.
Yes, sir.
But what is left? Once that's taken out, what am I sitting here volunteering for? What else
My
can we do?
understanding is what we've just done, that we are presented information that we're allowed to speak on, and that is it, unless there's something else I'm unaware. But we will not be, the short version is we will not be proposing anything. There will not be topics generated from people at this board. We're not allowed to have ideas of our own. We are only here to respond to what we've been handed, because we're duplicative,
So,
according to staff. Okay, caught up? Scott?
When I started on the HOAB, Jack specifically told me that the purpose of the HOAB was to look at ordinances, to offer suggestions, not to write or submit something for a text amendment, but to make suggestions from citizens about the current ordinances.
Correct.
When did that change?
Apparently Monday.
But I mean, if it was the intent from the beginning, I would think Jack Semino, of all people, would know the intent from the very beginning. And so if that was the intent, when did it change?
You heard Mr. Boone speak earlier about how the Land Advisory Board was originally formed. And as things go through different processes, we went through COVID, different things evolve over time. So I don't think it was a place you can put your finger on and say it's changed here. Things have evolved.
So the ordinances have stopped changing, and there's no need for input as the town evolves from citizens with ordinances that might affect something now for them that didn't affect them 10 years ago because things changed, the town has grown. Ordinances need to change and be updated.
We're constantly evolving. That's why we're here as a group to evaluate text changes. As Brad said, the original ordinance was written in '96. I can't even gather how many text amendments we've written over those 30 years now. So things are just constantly evolving, and this is just the latest ever evolution.
Okay.
Scott?
I was not in support of the changing of the bylaws, but they have been done. They've been adopted, they've been signed. Now I sit here on this board as HOAB, and this falls within what we need to do. I would have preferred probably no action, but since there's been a motion made, and I think that, again, our duty now is to look at the bylaw, look at the ordinances and see if it needs to be changed. With the change of bylaws, I think it's clear the ordinance needs to be changed. That doesn't change the fact that I don't agree with the bylaws being changed, but the reality is we are here today with a new bylaw. So with that, that's my comment. I'll support the motion for that reason.
could you put back on the screen the strikeouts and whatnot?
So this is from the zoning ordinance, Article 11.
Just removing it.
It's just removed. And then Article 5 of the subdivision ordinance.
Okay.
Mr. Whitaker, what you have in front of you, what was just passed out, are the new bylaws, the new bylaws. You haven't had a chance to look at them. That changed as well, but that's not what you're voting on right now. That's done. All you're voting on is taking the HOAB's name out of the zoning ordinances. You're removing the Huntersville Ordinance Advisory Board from zoning subdivision ordinances. Does that help?
Go back again to it. I didn't mean for you to take it off. I'm sorry.
This is the zoning ordinance reference,
Okay.
and the subdivision ordinance reference.
Just removing the name, that's all.
But the bylaws here say that
Yeah,
Correct. So just as Mr. Priest presented a text amendment, and you guys added valuable input to that, and when the next one comes through next month, you guys will still be able to provide input on that.
staff will determine what you look at.
Let's be clarified, any text amendment, planning board, citizens, developers, there are a number of ways that text amendments are generated. The town board could issue directly.
But not us, but not us. So citizens will have to figure out how to do that. Okay. I doubt it. Okay. I understand that the bylaws have gone through and that this is what is expected of us to move forward. I disagree with it completely. Obviously, I spoke on this the other night. I'm not going to re-speak on it today. I don't think this is in the public interest, and I do believe that's what I was brought here to do, is to speak on the public interest. I also understand that our vote doesn't matter we've been told that, in terms of they're going to push it on to the planning board anyway. So I don't feel bad by casting my nay vote. I don't believe it's going to hold anything up, and I just on the idea of it, I can't support it. Yes, let's go ahead and vote. So all in favor of the motion to approve of TA 2404, to remove the reference to the Ordinance Advisory Board from Zoning Ordinance Article 11.4.3A and Subdivision Ordinance Article 5. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, we have one, and any opposed? Okay, we have 4, and Harrison, are you abstaining? Okay, we have an abstention.
We would like to ask for then a vote to not recommend this as opposed to,
A vote to deny? Yeah,
Correct.
that's what I was assuming was coming, but that's okay. Anybody wanted to, I don't want to do this the wrong way, because boy, we got in trouble last month when somebody else did it the wrong way. So it needs to be someone who voted for it to change the motion, or someone,
we just need a motion to deny.
okay. So the town attorney said we just need a motion. Yes? Somebody? To deny.
Please explain that one more time.
Yeah. Because the original motion was to approve, and that did not pass. We're then asking now for a motion to deny, and then ask for another vote.
I thought we voted against it, which is a denial.
You voted to, your motion was to approve.
They're pretty similar.
The motion is not passed, though. There is no motion that's passed.
Correct.
So there needs to be a motion. They would like a motion to pass. So a new motion for denial.
Can I have some cooperation, please?
Denial to be approved.
Okay.
Phrase it that way.
Ms. Sloop?
So Ms. Jones made a recommendation to approve the text amendment. You seconded it. You were the only one in support of it. And so now we need a motion to deny the recommendation to approve.
What happens if we don't? It just,
We need to.
No, it doesn't go.
no, I mean, there's no recommendation made either way.
We are asking you all to make a recommendation on the text amendment. That's part of your duties as the HOAB.
Does it matter who makes the motion at this point? No. Okay, so I will make the motion. I make the motion to deny TA 2404, to deny removal of the reference to the Ordinance Advisory Board from Zoning Ordinance Article 11.4.3A and Subdivision Ordinance Article 5. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. All in favor of denying the removal? Okay, I have 4, and any against, opposed? Okay, I have an abstention. Thank you. Thank you for getting through that. Other business. 5A is to follow up discussion related to street stubs.
Good afternoon. We're here to talk about connectivity and street stubs. Unfortunately, Mr. Pollard is not here since this was one of his things so he wanted to chat about. It's one of our goals, the 2040 plan. We're supposed to be the most vibrant, livable community in North Carolina. Part of how we do that is we have a lot of infrastructure, quality of life. And one of those main backbones that we talk about, principles of the ordinance, is connectivity. Why is connectivity important? For these several reasons right here. Improved accessibility, better traffic flow, enhanced walkability, increased safety, support for public transportation, economic benefits, and environmental benefits. I'm not sure what Mr. Pollard's objective was or point that he's trying to get across this, but these are the reasons why we have connectivity. In a nutshell, if everybody's got a bunch of cul-de-sacs and one made road, you're going to clog up that artery. It's like your heart. So you have lots of veins, lots of arteries, and lots of ways to get around town. It disperses traffic. It allows for quicker fire response, quicker police response, and again, all these other factors. We've got, oh, there he is. Mr. Trott's over here to discuss some of the other parts of our ordinance, including some street subs that we do have around town that he's got some examples of.
Would it help if I reminded people of what Mr. Pollard's question was before? Okay. What he was saying is that when he was at North Carolina, for example, that development over there that's not completely finished, not the office, but the area, that he was walking around waiting on someone at a meeting, and he said that the street stubs were not sidewalks, the ADA compliant, they just ended. And he was asking questions about that in terms of why street stubs were literally stubs. So that was why, sorry.
And there was one other thing, like when the sidewalks stop, say, when a new development and you have them, when they stop, not necessarily at a street stub, but when they just stop.
In a yard.
Yeah, anywhere. There's no like curb cut or anything where if someone was handicapped, they would be able to cross the street. I think he included that in with it, that there maybe needed to be like, if that's going to be a stub for.
There wasn't that.
Yeah, but it was like there was no street stub, but say if this was, going out Mount Holly, Huntersville, or Huntersville Concord, and you've got a sidewalk and it just stops, and then grass starts and keeps going, he was concerned that there were no, like, curb cuts for people, And
I will say this before I turn it over to Stephen. We have upwards of 25 active subdivisions that range anywhere in years from 1995 to today. Standards have changed. When they're approved, you're allowed to build under those standards. So the more contemporary ones, we're going to have more of those things tightened up and addressed because those were challenges that we came across. And we'll leave it at that. Stephen?
Hey, good afternoon. I've got several slides here. These are just some various examples through town. I think that was part of the discussion before when the topic was brought up was, what are some things that may be occurring? And again, this is not every street stub in town. We need a lot more time to go through all of those, but I tried to pick some different scenarios and cases throughout town, some older, some newer, again, just to facilitate the discussion. What's up here, this is an example from, I believe, the Skybrook community. It's got a street stub, the picture on of the aerial there from above. That shows sidewalk on both sides, and then it ends before, a hammerhead type end of street. And the street length, is less than 500 feet, but more than 150 feet. I believe the fire code now is that anything less than 150 feet doesn't have to have a turnaround. But if you have more than 150 feet or more of a street, you have to have an approved turnaround that's fire accessible. And so I don't know all the history on the fire code and how often that's changed or when that changed, and we defer to the fire marshal on making that determination, but that's been the pretty consistent word that we've heard here recently. So in the context of this, this street length is definitely over 150 feet, and it has a turnaround at the very end, and the sidewalk goes down the street, and you may not be able to see, from the road intersection all the way down to the street that it ends. And there's a crossing there where this street, will currently end there, right at the hammerhead. And again, to just throwing out some different examples, and then maybe some discussion later on. This is a different subdivision. This is the off of Glenwick. This is off of Bud Henderson Road. There's a street stub there, not long after you come in into the subdivision from Bud Henderson. It's a really short section of street. You know, it's just one lot deep, and there's sidewalk on both sides. In the aerial, again, the Google Street View, you can see folks have decided to park there at the end of the street. It's a really short section. If you're standing, you know, at the intersection and you choose to walk down the street, you can see that it doesn't go anywhere. It's not very far that you can walk. And if you're out exercising and you can see that, you're probably out exercising. So turning around, turning and walking back where you came from, you know, maybe that's your goal. Also, there's driveways on this one as well. You could cross the street at the driveway. There's probably going to be pretty low traffic volume on that section of street, on that stub. So crossing at the driveway. It's not at the very end, but it is definitely closer than the intersection. The whole street may be only 100 feet long, so it's a relatively short stub. This is another example. Again, I'm just trying to give some various different cases here. This is a subdivision off Stevens Road. There's only sidewalk on one side of the street in this subdivision. So crossing the street, you may be crossing, but there's no sidewalk on the other side of the street to cross to. So there are various subdivisions in town that only have sidewalk on one side of the street. Some subdivisions have no sidewalk on either side of the street. There's a lot, you know, just depending on when it was built and what the standard was at that time. Again, these lots are larger, but it's still only one lot deep. And so this is a street view. It's hard, again, trying to see these on a screen. You know, when the screens get small, it's hard to see all the detail. But you can see here, if you're walking down the street, unfortunately, in this image, there's a vehicle blocking the sidewalk. Police would need to take care of that. But if you were walking down the street and there wasn't a vehicle there, again, you can see to the end of the street. You see that if you can see well, that's not a given either. If you can see well and you're out walking, then yes, you get down to the end of the street and have to turn around or come back to the driveway to get out, and if you're trying to cross the street there. This is a newer subdivision. This part is newer. I believe this is the Mirabella subdivision. Again, another example where there's a stub street to adjacent undeveloped property. There is sidewalk on both sides of the street, but there are no driveways on that section of street. So, you know, is there another opportunity to cross, again, in that one lot deep? Other than the intersection, no. But is there something down that street that you're trying to get to? Well, there's not a driveway, there's not anything else there. So, and if you're exercising, walking back and forth may be okay. But again, these are just various different examples. This one is Farrelltown Parkway. This is a newer road that was built. It builds down, the road Farrelltown Parkway south of Huntersville Concord goes down and then just stops. It stops just south of the intersection of, I believe that's Hugh Dixon Way. And there are crossings right there at the intersection. There's not one at the very end of the street, but it's relatively a short distance between where that intersection is to cross and the end of the street. This is the Hampton Park Boulevard. I think this is where Ortho Carolinas is, on the very northern end. So yes, there's sidewalk on both sides of the street, and at the very end, there's not a crossing, but there are driveways on both sides of the street that folks can use to cross the street. You know, at the very northern side of the driveway, again, the street just ends, so I wouldn't expect any traffic to be past that driveway, unless there's folks parked up there, as you kind of see in the street view. Seems to be a common theme. That's a whole different topic, but you've got a street stub. Yes, there's no sidewalk or dedicated crosswalk across the end, but there are, in this case, two driveways, since those two developments have built and put driveways at the northern end. This is another example. This is actually in the Walden subdivision. And so this may be getting to what was brought up as, you know, a potential solution. Look back through the plans.
that was actually not in the plans. So I'm not sure what happened out there. But the plans don't show any kind of crossing or concrete at the end of the street. And it doesn't look like it has any truncated domes or anything, so is it really a crossing? It looks like it's just being used for parking. Again, you're seeing a common theme here with folks parking at the end of streets. Again, I just randomly selected these. I wasn't out looking for people parking at the end of the street, but
Giving tickets.
it's just, let's just randomly pick stuff spread out through town, and that's what was out there on the street views from Google. But again, even if you have locations and you put crossings in, people may want to try to park on them out there if you do have something. So it may be an unintended consequence if there is a change to do that. When this street gets extended, that'll all need to be taken out. So there's an expense with having to take out and remove things there, and then you have to maintain it while it's out there too. So this is a relatively, again, short stub. It's about one lot deep. How much how much pedestrian traffic is really going to occur at the end of a short stub street that's one that then the public may have to maintain. Next couple slides are some standards we have from the standards manual. These are standard details. Doesn't mean somebody has to use these. These are just in the standards manual. When you have a cul-de-sac, the standard shows sidewalk all the way around the whole thing. I'll say, from a practicality standpoint, if there are no lots, say off the end of a cul-de-sac, maybe like that Hammerhead example in the very first one, there were no lots past the end. So if you're not trying to walk there, you're really just making a lap. I'd say we would allow a crossing there before, right at the start of the bulb in the cul-de-sac. Again, to reduce that length of sidewalk that the town has to maintain if nothing is going to be built, in the cul-de-sac or Hammerhead area. And then another standard detail, again, if there's uses at the end of the cul-de-sac, then it makes sense to have sidewalk to get you there. But if not, like the example showed it there at the very beginning, then just a crossing right before that Hammerhead, if there's not going to be any other use there at the end. So it could be a combination of those two things. We also have a standard for local street temporary turnaround. This is just something where if a street's maybe in a phase of construction, it's not the final stage of the plan. It's just something temporary, some temporary places for people to back in, turn around at the end of the street. That's the intent, is to have something there so people don't get to the end of the street and then have to back all the way out of a long section of street. Have an area for temporary turnaround and stop the sidewalk short right there before you get to the very end of that. And again, these are just some various things that I put together to kind of facilitate discussion on this topic.
And one other thing I think Mr. Pollak was going after, but I thought it was dealt with very well at the end, was he was worried about those people that might be operating in wheelchairs or with walkers or something like that. And he was concerned about their ability to cross safely and, exit one sidewalk safely with a cut or something, as opposed to not being able to take their wheelchair over the curb, if you will. But I thought, Mr. Richards, if I'm attributing this to you correctly, at the end of our discussion, in the last 5 minutes of it, I thought you put it to rest when you said that the plans, as you've just discussed today, have been in place since 2018. So much of what I thought he feared and was, I apologize, most of what he feared had been taken care of as early as 2018. And if we could, and my thought at the time was, I'm satisfied. I appreciated his concerns, but I was satisfied by the response that we are doing exactly what he suggested be done. And I was afraid that any further discussion would want to go back and try to remediate streets and issues that predeceased 2018, which would open a can of worms that would be expensive for this.
Was never the intention, absolutely.
So I was satisfied by your answer then, so I don't really have any addition to want to pursue this any further. He may have a different opinion if he were here, and you all may disagree, but I think what you've shown us today is the solution to what Mr. Pollard was seeking. And I don't have permission to speak on his behalf, but I do
You got to do something, yeah. No, I was just going to say that I nerd out on this stuff, and I appreciate it, and I know that you've got a big job to do, and I appreciate you putting this together for us, so that we can, like I understand it, but that we can somewhat understand it as a layperson and to see what the goal is and whatnot, and absolutely never to say that we need to go back and do stuff that doesn't even go to the zoning ordinances. That has never been the explanation. Yeah, I think that last meeting it was, and it was never my intention of being able to bring up topics that it would make you spend the inordinate amount of time that you have to do to put these things together, but to be able to help educate citizens and people who have questions, like he had the question. I'll make him do his homework. I'm sorry, he's not here. But other than that, thank you. Anything else? Okay.
This would not come up under the new bylaw.
It would not.
I mean, there'd be no reason for this to come before.
To put words in your mouth and planning staff, you all are satisfied, you've looked into it, and you don't see any reason to carry it any further.
I don't see any reason to change the ordinance. And usually, these are discussions based on individual cases that we have during the construction plan development process on where do you have ramps, where do you not? Where does it make sense? I don't know that the ordinance specifically talks about that a whole lot. Usually, we work through that as part of the plan development process.
Well,
Maybe that was part of the question is do you need something in the ordinance to make people do something or not? We haven't seen it be an issue so far.
I believe that the development he was speaking of was before 2018, and that was where the light bulb was for us. And
Again, I appreciate time and weighing in on it. I think I'm comfortable.
right. Okay, and it was just a discussion. There's not a vote.
Must be time to go home.
All right. Is there anything else?
If we adjourn.
Can we have a motion to adjourn? Yes, sir.
He made the motion.
I moved.
Made a motion, and we have a second?
Second.
Where are we going to discuss that? All right. Do we have a vote? A vote to adjourn? Everyone? Yes, that's unanimous. Thank you.
Not me and you.